"You're fired." The words cracked across the glass-walled conference room so sharply that even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop for a moment. No one spoke. No one moved. And no one, not the executives around the polished oak table, not the managers staring into their laptops, not even the woman who had just ended his career, had any idea that the exhausted single father sitting before them had spent the last 48 hours fighting a battle that had quietly saved the company from disaster. Morning sunlight poured through the 42nd floor windows of Hayes Technologies, painting long rectangles of gold across the floor. Outside, downtown Chicago moved with its usual urgency. Taxis crawled through traffic. Construction cranes stretched into the sky. Thousands of people hurried toward jobs they hoped would still be there tomorrow. Inside the executive conference room, however, one man's future had just disappeared. Owen Parker sat at the far end of the table. His navy blue shirt was wrinkled. His tie hung slightly loose. Dark circles framed his tired eyes. He looked less like a senior cybersecurity engineer and more like someone who had just stepped off a red-eye flight after crossing 3 time zones. Victoria Hayes stood at the head of the room. At 37, she had built Hayes Technologies into one of the fastest-growing software companies in America. Investors admired her. Employees respected her. Competitors feared her. Her tailored charcoal suit matched the steel determination in her expression. "This is the 3rd time this quarter," she said coldly. "3rd time I've walked into a meeting and found you asleep." Several executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Owen slowly blinked. His eyes struggled to focus beneath the fluorescent lights overhead. "Victoria," he began quietly. "I can explain." "Can you?" she interrupted. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're collecting a 6-figure salary while sleeping through critical meetings." The room remained silent. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the city streets below. Owen rubbed his forehead. His fingers trembled slightly from exhaustion. For a brief moment, he considered telling her everything. The warning alerts, the system breaches, the endless stream of malicious attacks hammering the company's infrastructure, the 48 hours without meaningful sleep. But years of discipline held him back. Excuses sounded weak. Facts needed proof. And right now, he had neither. Victoria folded her arms. "Our clients trust us with sensitive information. Millions of users rely on our systems every day. I need people who are fully present." Owen looked around the room. Most employees avoided eye contact. A few appeared sympathetic. Others seemed relieved the spotlight wasn't on them. Brandon Cole, the company's chief operations officer, leaned back in his chair with a faint smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. "Maybe it's time," Brandon said smoothly, "to find someone who can keep up with the pace." Victoria nodded. "I agree." The words landed harder than she intended. Even she seemed surprised by how final they sounded. Owen sat perfectly still. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply stared at the polished tabletop for a second before lifting his eyes toward hers. There was no anger there. No resentment. Only a quiet sadness. "Understood," he said. The simplicity of his response unsettled several people in the room. Victoria had expected resistance. She had expected frustration. Instead, the exhausted engineer slowly gathered his notebook and laptop. The silence that followed felt strangely heavy. As Owen stood, his phone vibrated once inside his pocket. He glanced down at the screen. A picture of a smiling 10-year-old girl appeared beside a text message. "Sophie, good luck in your meeting, Dad. Love you." A small smile touched his face. It was the first genuine expression anyone had seen from him all morning. Then he slipped the phone away and picked up his bag. Victoria watched him head toward the door. For reasons she couldn't explain, something about the sight bothered her. Maybe it was how calm he seemed. Maybe it was the complete absence of self-defense. Or maybe it was the feeling that she had missed something important. But the moment passed quickly. The door opened. Owen stepped into the hallway. And as it closed behind him, nobody in that room realized they had just fired the very man standing between Hayes Technologies and the worst crisis in its history. 48 hours earlier, the city had looked completely different. Rain streaked down the windows of Hayes Technologies headquarters in thin silver lines. Most employees had already gone home. Elevators sat idle. Conference rooms stood empty. Entire floors rested beneath dimmed evening lights. But on the 27th floor, one office remained illuminated. Multiple monitors cast a pale blue glow across Owen Parker's face as lines of code scrolled endlessly across the screens. He leaned forward, studying a cluster of warning alerts that had appeared less than 20 minutes earlier. At first glance, they seemed routine. Small spikes in network traffic happened every day. Automated scans from unknown sources were common. Most cybersecurity professionals learned to filter out noise and focus only on genuine threats. But something about these alerts felt wrong. Too coordinated, too deliberate, too patient. Owen clicked through another series of reports. His jaw tightened. Hundreds of connection attempts were arriving from different countries at nearly the same time. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they formed a pattern. Someone was probing the company's defenses, testing weaknesses, looking for a way inside. He checked the clock. 8:14 in the evening. Most people would have logged off hours ago. Instead, Owen opened another diagnostic panel and began tracing the activity deeper into the network. The rain tapped softly against the glass while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Minutes became hours. The building grew quieter. Cleaning crews moved through distant hallways. Security guards made their rounds. Yet Owen remained fixed in front of his screens. At 10:30, his phone buzzed. Sophie. A picture message appeared. His daughter sat at their kitchen table holding up a handmade science project decorated with stars and planets. Underneath, she had typed 4 simple words. Did you see this? A tired smile crossed his face. He immediately responded. It looks amazing, sweetheart. I am proud of you. A reply came seconds later. Are you coming home soon? Owen stared at the message longer than he intended. He hated disappointing her. Since losing his wife years earlier, every promise mattered. Every dinner missed felt personal. But the alerts on his screens continued multiplying. He typed carefully. I might be late tonight. Save me some pizza. A few moments passed. Then her answer arrived. Okay, Dad. Love you. Love you too. He set the phone down and returned to work. Midnight arrived. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. The attack evolved. What had started as probing attempts transformed into something far more sophisticated. Entire groups of servers were being targeted simultaneously. Firewalls blocked one route only for 2 more to appear. Automated defenses handled most of the traffic, but Owen noticed something increasingly troubling. Whoever was behind this operation was learning, adapting, testing responses. Somewhere behind thousands of miles of digital distance, a skilled team was studying haze technologies in real time. Owen reached for another cup of coffee. The pot beside his desk had long since gone cold. He drank it anyway. By sunrise, dozens of security protocols had been manually adjusted. Potential vulnerabilities were patched. New monitoring systems were deployed. Yet the attacks continued. Employees began arriving for work as if it were any ordinary Thursday morning. They carried coffee cups, discussed weekend plans, complained about traffic. None of them realized a silent war was unfolding beneath the surface of the systems they depended on every day. Owen watched the sun rise over Chicago through rain-streaked glass. His eyes burned from exhaustion. His shoulders ached. But then another alert appeared, larger than the previous ones. More dangerous. He opened the report and felt his stomach tighten. The intruders were no longer searching for weaknesses. They had found one. Somewhere deep within the company's infrastructure, a door had begun to open. And if he could not close it quickly, millions of customer records and years of corporate trust could disappear overnight. Owen glanced toward the bustling office outside his glass wall. Employees laughed. Phones rang. Meetings began. Life carried on normally. Only one person understood how serious the situation had become. Quietly, without announcing it to anyone, Owen rolled up his sleeves, turned back toward his monitors, and prepared for the longest 48 hours of his life. The first day, without sleep, was difficult. The second became dangerous. By late Friday afternoon, Owen Parker could feel exhaustion settling into his bones like winter cold. Yet every time he considered stepping away from his desk, another alert appeared. Another anomaly surfaced. Another threat demanded attention. Outside his office, Haze Technologies continued operating as if nothing unusual was happening. Employees hurried between meetings carrying laptops and coffee cups. Marketing teams discussed product launches. Sales executives celebrated new contracts. Nobody realized that beneath the polished surface of the company, invisible pressure was building. Owen leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. 3 monitors displayed streams of security data. A fourth showed a constantly updating threat map. Red indicators flashed across multiple regions of the world. Every few minutes, a new attempt targeted company infrastructure. Some were blocked automatically. Others required manual intervention. The attackers were persistent, intelligent, patient. They seemed determined to find a way inside. His phone vibrated again. Sophie. He smiled despite his exhaustion and answered immediately. Hey, sweetheart. Dad, are you coming to the science fair tonight? The question hit him harder than any warning alert. He checked the time. 6:12 in the evening. The science fair started in less than an hour. Owen closed his eyes briefly. For weeks, Sophie had talked about nothing else. She had built an entire model of the solar system by herself. She had painted every planet, added labels, memorized facts. She wanted her father there. More than anything. I am trying, Owen said carefully. I really am. Silence filled the line for a moment. Then came her small voice. It is okay if you cannot. But it did not sound okay. Not even close. Owen stared at the flashing security dashboard. Responsibility pulled him in two directions at once. One side was the company. Thousands of employees. Millions of customers. Years of trust. The other side was a 10-year-old girl waiting beside a cardboard display covered with glitter stars. I will make it, he promised. Even if I am late. Her excitement returned instantly. Really? Really? Love you, Dad. Love you too. The call ended. Owen grabbed his jacket and prepared to leave. Then another alert exploded across his center monitor. Critical vulnerability detected. Unauthorized access attempt in progress. His heart sank. The timing could not have been worse. He quickly opened the report. What he saw erased any thought of leaving. The attackers had discovered an aging server connected to a legacy system. It was exactly the type of weakness skilled intruders searched for. Small, forgotten, dangerous. Owen immediately began implementing containment measures. Minutes passed, then an hour. By the time he finally looked at the clock again, the science fair was over. He sat motionless for several seconds. The office around him had grown quiet. Most employees had gone home. Chicago's evening skyline glowed beyond the windows like a sea of distant stars. Slowly, he reached for his phone. A new message waited. It contained a photograph. Sophie stood beside her project, holding a blue ribbon. Her smile was proud but slightly sad. Under the picture she had written, I won second place. I wish you could have seen it. Owen swallowed hard. The victory should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like another sacrifice added to a growing list. He typed carefully. I am so proud of you. You deserved first place. A few moments later, she responded. It is okay. Maybe next time. Those 3 words lingered in his mind long after the conversation ended. Maybe next time. The phrase carried more grace than most adults could manage. More forgiveness than he felt he deserved. Owen placed the phone face down on the desk and returned to work. The attacks were accelerating now. The pressure was increasing. And somewhere deep inside the network, hidden behind layers of code and deception, someone was preparing a move that could change everything. Saturday arrived beneath a gray Chicago sky, and with it came a level of pressure Owen Parker had never experienced in his entire career. The attacks no longer came in waves. They came continuously. Every time he sealed one vulnerability, another appeared somewhere else. Every report he generated painted the same picture. Whoever was targeting Hayes Technologies was organized, disciplined, and frighteningly patient. The company was not facing random digital noise. It was being studied, hunted. At 7:15 that morning, Owen walked quickly through nearly empty hallways carrying a laptop in one hand and a folder of printed security reports in the other. He had reached a conclusion he could no longer ignore. Victoria Hayes needed to know what was happening. Immediately, he arrived outside the executive suite and requested an emergency meeting. The assistant glanced at the schedule and frowned. Victoria is in back-to-back meetings all day. This cannot wait, Owen replied. It is critical. Before the assistant could answer, another voice interrupted. Critical. Owen turned. Brandon Cole stood near the entrance holding a tablet beneath one arm. His expensive suit looked flawless despite the early hour. What exactly is critical? Owen handed him one of the reports. The intrusion attempts have escalated significantly. They are probing deeper into our infrastructure. We need executive authorization for additional containment measures. Brandon scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. His expression remained calm. Too calm. This looks like standard cybersecurity activity. Owen stared at him. No, it is not standard. Every company gets attacked. Not like this. Brandon handed the report back. You are overreacting. The words landed like a brick. Owen took a slow breath. If I am wrong, we lose nothing by preparing. And if you are wrong, Brandon replied, you create panic, delay projects, and waste resources. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Employees passed through the hallway carrying coffee and laptops. The normal rhythm of business continued around them. But Owen could feel something else beneath Brandon's response. Resistance. Not caution. Resistance. I need 5 minutes with Victoria, Owen said firmly. Brandon smiled politely. You do not need 5 minutes with the chief executive officer every time you see a threat report. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. Focus on your department. Let leadership handle leadership. The conversation ended there. Not because Owen agreed. Because he realized arguing would accomplish nothing. He walked away carrying the reports, but unease settled heavily inside him. Back on the cybersecurity floor, the situation continued deteriorating. New alerts appeared every hour. System logs revealed increasingly sophisticated attempts to bypass security controls. Owen and 2 junior analysts worked continuously through the afternoon. One of those analysts, a bright 24-year-old named Rachel Turner, watched him closely. Have you slept? She asked. Not much. You look terrible. Owen managed a tired smile. Thank you. Rachel did not smile back. I am serious. She studied the threat dashboard. These attacks are getting worse. I know. Did leadership approve your recommendations? Owen hesitated. Not yet. Rachel looked confused. Why not? He had no answer that made sense. By evening, the office lights reflected against darkened windows. Rain began falling again. The city blurred beneath sheets of water while computer screens illuminated exhausted faces inside the Security Operations Center. Then, at exactly 8:43 that night, a new alert appeared. Every monitor in the room flashed red simultaneously. Rachel's eyes widened. Owen. He was already moving. I see it. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Internal credentials compromised. The words seemed to freeze the air itself. Someone had moved beyond external probing. Someone was now trying to enter the system using legitimate employee credentials. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of servers and the tapping of rain against glass. Owen stared at the warning message. Deep down, he knew the attack had entered a dangerous new phase. And even more troubling was one realization he could no longer ignore. Somewhere inside Hayes Technologies, someone had either made a catastrophic mistake or opened a door that should never have been opened at all. The clock on Owen Parker's monitor read 1:17 a.m. Sunday morning. 41 hours. That was how long he had been awake, with only a few scattered minutes of rest in a chair that felt harder every hour. The Security Operations Center had become a world of glowing screens, empty coffee cups, and quiet determination. Rachel Turner sat 2 desks away reviewing logs with tired eyes. The cleaning crew had come and gone twice. Outside, the city slept beneath clouds and rain. Inside Hayes Technologies, the battle continued. I found another compromised account, Rachel said suddenly. Owen rolled his chair closer. Show me. She pointed at the screen. The login originated from a valid employee credential, but the behavior pattern does not match the user. Owen studied the report. His pulse quickened. Whoever was behind the attacks was becoming more aggressive. They were no longer testing the company's defenses. They were moving through them. Carefully. Methodically. Like someone exploring rooms inside a house after finding the front door unlocked. Disable the account, Owen said. Immediately. Rachel nodded and began typing. Across the room, warning indicators continued blinking red. New attempts appeared every few minutes. Some targeted financial databases. Others focused on customer information systems. Several were aimed at internal development servers. The attackers seemed interested in everything. Owen opened another monitoring panel and froze. A series of requests had appeared inside a section of infrastructure that should have been inaccessible. He leaned closer to the screen. Then closer still. No, he whispered. Rachel looked up. What is it? Owen did not answer immediately. His eyes moved rapidly through rows of data. The realization felt like cold water. The attackers had discovered a pathway connecting multiple legacy systems. Individually, the systems posed little risk. Together, they formed a hidden route deeper into company infrastructure. A route nobody had considered dangerous because nobody expected anyone to find it. How bad? Rachel asked. Owen finally looked at her. Bad enough. Silence filled the room. The hum of servers sounded louder than before. Rain tapped softly against distant windows. Every second seemed heavier than the last. Owen immediately began creating emergency containment protocols. Firewalls were adjusted. Access permissions were restricted. Monitoring thresholds were raised. Every action bought time. But only time. The attacks kept coming. At 6:30 Sunday morning, sunlight slowly emerged behind thick clouds. Employees began arriving for weekend projects and maintenance work. Most noticed nothing unusual. They passed through hallways carrying coffee and breakfast sandwiches. They greeted coworkers, checked emails, discussed sports scores. Life remained normal. Yet beneath that normalcy, strain was beginning to show. Internal systems occasionally slowed. Certain applications became temporarily unavailable. Small glitches appeared throughout the network. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. By noon, Victoria Hayes received her first warning from customer support. Several enterprise clients had reported unusual service interruptions. She immediately requested status updates from multiple departments. Brandon Cole dismissed concerns. Minor technical issues, he assured her. Nothing significant. Victoria accepted the explanation and moved on to other priorities. Meanwhile, on the cybersecurity floor, Owen watched another wave of intrusion attempts hit company servers. His vision blurred briefly. He rubbed his eyes. The room tilted for half a second before stabilizing again. Exhaustion was becoming a serious problem. Rachel noticed immediately. You need rest. Not yet. You have been saying that for 2 days. Owen glanced toward the threat dashboard. More alerts appeared. More warnings. More evidence that the attackers were preparing something larger. If I stop now, he said quietly, there might not be a company to come back to. Rachel wanted to argue. Instead, she looked at the screens and fell silent. Because deep down she knew he was right. Then, at exactly 2:42 p.m., every monitor in the operations center flashed simultaneously. The room froze. A new alert appeared across every display. Massive coordinated intrusion attempt detected. Estimated attack volume, unprecedented. Owen stared at the message. The final phase had begun. The next 12 hours felt like an entire lifetime compressed into a single night. The coordinated attack struck from every direction at once. Thousands of automated requests flooded company systems. Hidden exploits activated. Compromised credentials attempted access across multiple departments. The Security Operations Center transformed into a sea of flashing alerts and urgent notifications. Owen Parker barely left his chair. His hands moved constantly across keyboards while streams of data raced across monitors. Rachel Turner worked beside him without complaint. Neither spoke much anymore. There was simply too much to do. Every minute mattered. Every decision carried consequences. At 4:23 Sunday afternoon, Owen successfully isolated 3 vulnerable systems before attackers could move deeper into the network. At 6:11, he blocked another major intrusion attempt targeting customer databases. At 8:57, he discovered a hidden access route that had been silently exploited for nearly 6 hours. Each victory bought time. Each success prevented disaster. Yet the pressure never eased. The attackers adapted as quickly as defenses changed. Midnight came and went. Coffee lost its effect. Fatigue settled heavily over everyone in the room. Rachel rubbed her eyes and looked toward Owen. When was the last time you slept? She asked softly. Owen stared at a screen filled with security logs. I do not remember. Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. The truth was visible on his face. His eyes were bloodshot. His movements had become slower. Even his posture seemed weighed down by exhaustion. Yet somehow he kept going. By sunrise Monday morning, the attack had finally begun to weaken. Not because the attackers had given up, because Owen had systematically closed nearly every path they were trying to exploit. The company remained operational. Customer data remained protected. Systems remained standing. It was not a complete victory, but it was enough. For the first time in 48 hours, Owen allowed himself to breathe. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for what he intended to be only a moment. Across the room, Rachel smiled faintly. You did it, she whispered. Owen never heard her. Exhaustion won. His head lowered slowly. Within seconds, he was asleep. Less than 2 hours later, he found himself sitting inside the executive conference room. The weekly leadership meeting had already started. Sunlight streamed through towering windows overlooking Chicago. Executives discussed quarterly projections and investor expectations. Owen struggled to focus. Voices sounded distant. Numbers blurred together. His body demanded rest with a force he could no longer resist. Victoria Hayes stood near a presentation screen, discussing upcoming expansion plans. Brandon Cole sat nearby reviewing financial reports. Nobody in the room knew what had happened over the previous 48 hours. Nobody knew how close the company had come to serious trouble. Nobody knew the man sitting quietly at the far end of the table had spent 2 straight days protecting systems most executives took for granted. Then it happened. Owen's eyes closed. Just for a second. Then another. His chin lowered toward his chest. The room continued talking while exhaustion finally overwhelmed determination. Several executives noticed first. Brandon noticed next. A faint smile appeared. Victoria followed his gaze. Her expression hardened immediately. Owen. No response. Owen. Several people shifted uncomfortably. He opened his eyes slowly, disoriented and exhausted. The room was staring at him. Silence settled across the conference table. Victoria's voice became cold. Are you sleeping during this meeting? Owen tried to gather his thoughts. I can explain. But the words sounded weak even to him. Brandon leaned back quietly. Several executives exchanged glances. Victoria's patience finally broke. Everything that happened afterward would become the moment she remembered for years. Because standing before her was not a careless employee, not a disengaged engineer, not a man lacking commitment. It was the exhausted guardian who had just spent 48 hours protecting a company that was about to send him away. The conference room door closed behind Owen Parker with a quiet click that seemed far louder than it should have. He stood alone in the hallway for several seconds, holding a laptop bag that suddenly felt heavier than anything he had carried during the previous 2 days. Employees walked past without realizing what had happened. Phones rang. Elevators opened and closed. Business continued as usual. Yet for Owen, an entire chapter of his life had just ended. He pressed the elevator button and waited. His reflection stared back from polished steel doors. The man looking back barely resembled the confident engineer who had walked into the building years earlier. His eyes were tired. His shoulders sagged beneath exhaustion. But there was something else there too. Peace. Strange, unexpected peace. He had done everything he could. The elevator arrived. He stepped inside and descended 42 floors in silence. Upstairs, the executive meeting resumed. Victoria Hayes attempted to focus on quarterly reports, but something felt off. The image of Owen quietly gathering his belongings refused to leave her mind. Most terminated employees argued. Some pleaded. Others became angry. Owen had done none of those things. He had simply accepted the decision and walked away. Victoria? Brandon Cole's voice interrupted her thoughts. Are you ready to continue? She nodded. Yes. Go ahead. Brandon launched into projections and growth targets. But before he could finish, a notification appeared on several executive laptops simultaneously. One executive frowned. Another opened an email. A third checked his phone. Confusion spread around the room. What is that? Victoria asked. The chief financial officer looked up. We are receiving reports of unusual system delays. Brandon immediately waved it off. Temporary server congestion. But another notification arrived. Then another. Then 3 more. The room grew quieter. Across the building, customer support teams began receiving calls. Internal applications slowed. Certain employee accounts suddenly lost access to critical systems. Nothing had collapsed, but something was clearly wrong. Victoria's expression tightened. I thought you said everything was under control. Brandon forced a smile. It is. Meanwhile, 2 floors below, Rachel Turner stared at her monitor in disbelief. She had spent the last hour reviewing security logs after Owen's departure. At first, she was simply trying to document the events of the weekend. Then she noticed something unusual. One blocked intrusion attempt carried Owen's credentials. Then another. Then another. She expanded the search window. Hundreds appeared. Rachel's eyes widened. She continued digging deeper. Thousands of security events filled the screen. Each one linked to actions Owen had personally taken during the previous 48 hours. Blocked attacks. Closed vulnerabilities. Isolated systems. Emergency patches. Manual interventions. The sheer volume was staggering. Rachel opened another report. Then another. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Her breathing slowed. Her hands stopped moving. For a long moment, she simply stared at the screen. Finally, she whispered 4 words. "Oh my God, Owen." She immediately printed dozens of pages and hurried toward the executive floor. The elevator ride felt endless. Every second increased the weight growing inside her chest. When the doors opened, she nearly ran through the hallway. She reached the conference room and pushed through the doors without waiting for permission. Conversation stopped instantly. Brandon frowned. "This meeting is private." Rachel ignored him. Her eyes locked on Victoria. "You need to see this." Victoria accepted the stack of reports. The room remained silent as she began turning pages. 1 page became 5. 5 became 10. 10 became 20. With every report, her expression changed. Confusion became concern. Concern became disbelief. Because printed across every page was the same name. Owen Parker. And the deeper she looked, the more horrifying the truth became. The man she had fired less than an hour earlier had not been sleeping through his responsibilities. He had been carrying the weight of an entire company on his shoulders. For several seconds, nobody in the conference room spoke. The only sound came from the soft rustle of paper as Victoria Hayes continued turning pages. Every report told the same story. Every timestamp pointed to the same person. While executives had spent the weekend with their families, while managers had attended dinners and sporting events, while leadership discussed growth strategies and investor expectations, one exhausted engineer had been quietly protecting the entire company. Victoria reached the final page and slowly lowered the stack onto the conference table. The room felt different now. Smaller somehow. Heavier. "How much of this is verified?" she asked quietly. Rachel Turner swallowed. "All of it." She pointed towards several highlighted sections. "Every intervention is documented. Every blocked intrusion. Every emergency patch. Every containment protocol." Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That does not necessarily mean he was the only one involved." Rachel turned toward him. "No, but it means he was the reason we survived the weekend." Silence followed. This time nobody challenged her. Then another executive's phone vibrated. He glanced down and immediately frowned. "We have a problem." Victoria looked up. "What now?" "Several systems are experiencing new disruptions." Across the room, 3 more notifications arrived. Customer support queues were filling. Internal communications platforms were slowing again. Service interruptions were spreading. Rachel hurried toward a laptop and opened a live monitoring dashboard. Her face drained of color. "They are back." Victoria stood immediately. "Who?" Rachel looked directly at her. "The attackers." The room erupted into movement. Executives grabbed phones. Assistants rushed into hallways. Emergency meetings were scheduled within minutes. Yet beneath all the activity lingered one undeniable truth. The person most qualified to handle the crisis was no longer employed there. Victoria stared at the reports one final time. Then she made a decision. Find him. 35 minutes later, Victoria sat alone in the back seat of a black company vehicle moving through afternoon traffic. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Downtown skyscrapers gradually gave way to older neighborhoods lined with brick apartment buildings and small family-owned businesses. She held Owen's personnel file in her lap. Until today, she had never opened it. She knew his position, his salary, his performance reviews, but not the man himself. The file revealed details she had never bothered to learn. Widower. Single parent. Emergency contact. Sophie Parker. No spouse listed. No secondary household income. Just a father and his daughter. The realization left an uncomfortable ache in her chest. The vehicle finally stopped outside a modest 3-story apartment building on a quiet street. There were no luxury amenities. No private parking garage. No signs of wealth or status. Just a clean brick building surrounded by maple trees beginning to turn gold. Victoria climbed the stairs and found apartment 3B. She hesitated before knocking. A few moments later, the door opened. A young girl stood there wearing a faded blue sweatshirt and holding a science project covered in planets and stars. She looked up curiously. "Can I help you?" Victoria suddenly forgot every prepared sentence. "Hi," she said softly. "Is your father home?" The girl brightened immediately. "Dad." She turned toward the apartment. "Dad, someone is here." Victoria glanced inside. The apartment was small but warm. Family photographs covered one wall. A worn couch sat beside a bookshelf overflowing with novels and school projects. The scent of grilled cheese drifted from the kitchen. It felt nothing like a corporate office. It felt real. Moments later, Owen appeared. He looked even more exhausted than he had earlier. Yet the moment he saw Sophie, his expression softened completely. The tiredness remained, but something brighter emerged beneath it. Love. Simple and undeniable. "Soph," he said gently, "why do not you finish your homework?" She nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Then Owen looked toward Victoria. Surprise crossed his face, followed by confusion. "What are you doing here?" Victoria struggled to answer. Because standing inside that small apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life built on sacrifice and quiet dignity, she realized something painful. She had come looking for an employee. Instead, she had found a man she never truly saw. Owen Parker listened quietly as Victoria Hayes explained the situation. She told him about the new disruptions spreading through company systems. She told him about the reports Rachel had uncovered. She told him about the realization that had swept through the executive floor after his departure. When she finished, silence settled over the small apartment. The ticking of a kitchen clock seemed unusually loud. Somewhere down the hallway, Sophie hummed softly while working on homework. Owen looked toward the floor for a moment before raising his eyes. "You already made your decision," he said gently. Victoria swallowed. "I made it without knowing the truth." Owen did not respond immediately. He simply looked tired. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. That somehow made everything harder. "I came here to apologize," Victoria said, "and to ask for your help." A faint smile appeared on Owen's face. "You are asking a fired employee to save the company?" For the first time that day, Victoria almost laughed. Yes. The honesty of the answer hung between them. Owen glanced toward the hallway where Sophie sat working beneath a small lamp. For 48 hours he had carried responsibility without recognition. Now he faced a different choice. He could walk away. Nobody would blame him. Nobody would question him. Yet character has a way of revealing itself when nobody expects it. Owen slowly stood. "Let me grab my laptop." Less than an hour later, he was back inside Hayes Technologies. The atmosphere had changed completely. Employees who had barely noticed him before now stepped aside as he walked through the halls. Executives who rarely visited the cybersecurity floor waited anxiously outside conference rooms. Rachel smiled the moment she saw him. "I knew you would come back." Owen shook his head. "I came back for the people depending on us." Then he went to work. The final attack was already underway. Multiple systems were being targeted simultaneously. Service interruptions continued spreading. Customer concerns multiplied by the minute. Yet this time Owen was not alone. Rachel worked beside him. Additional engineers joined the effort. Even departments that rarely interacted with cybersecurity offered support. Hour by hour, progress returned. Vulnerabilities were sealed. Compromised accounts were secured. Hidden access routes were eliminated. The pressure slowly began to ease. By midnight, warning indicators started disappearing from monitoring dashboards. By 2 in the morning, customer systems stabilized. By dawn, the crisis was over. The company had survived. Again, 3 days later, every employee gathered inside the main auditorium. Conversations filled the room as hundreds of people waited for the scheduled company meeting to begin. Victoria stood on stage beneath bright lights. Behind her, a large screen displayed a simple message: gratitude and recognition. The room gradually fell silent. Victoria took a slow breath. There are moments in leadership when you discover whether you truly understand the people around you. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Last week, I failed that test. The honesty immediately captured the room. Victoria continued. I judged someone based on a single moment instead of the sacrifices that moment represented. Then she looked toward the front row. Owen sat quietly beside Sophie. The person I fired was the person who saved this company. Silence followed. Deep, complete silence. Hundreds of employees turned toward Owen. Some looked shocked. Others looked ashamed. Many simply looked grateful. Victoria stepped away from the podium and walked directly toward him. "Owen Parker," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "On behalf of every employee, every customer, and every leader in this company, thank you." The auditorium erupted into applause. People stood. Then more stood. Soon the entire room was on its feet. But Owen's attention was not on the crowd. It was on the small girl beside him. Sophie looked up with shining eyes and a smile so full of pride it seemed to light the entire room. She squeezed his hand and whispered the only words that truly mattered. "That is my dad."